we should have on the supermarket shelves things that are real food, just call them food. And then the things that aren't real food, call them not food. They have to put not food on it. Difference. And like if you willingly eat not food, which I would include spaghetti and things like in there, Coca-Cola, you name it, people would not be confused. Well, that's where the, I guess, convoluting of this question comes into play, is people see all the junk food as food. And yet pseudo nourishes you, but I think it strips more out of you than it gives you nourishment.
For sure. It makes you toxic, and, you know, you start to gain fat, and you start to become insulin resistant. And, you know, those all, I think we can't separate out the problems that people have, because they all feed into one another. You know what I mean? So whether you're toxic or you're overweight or you're estrogen dominant, it's not really one thing, because sooner or later, they're probably going to all come around. Yeah. Most of the people that, you know, have problems like that don't just have one in isolation. Yes. You know, they all kind of piece together.
Absolutely. So I'm curious, because insulin is that master hormone, which, by the way, I hear your little doggy in the background.
I know. I'm sorry. She's out there barking at the gardener.
She's so cute. Hi, gardener. Hi, dog. So insulin is the master hormone. And what role does higher levels of insulin play in this estrogen dominance? I would assume it would exacerbate it. It would speed up the process.
Yeah, it does. So insulin is a fat storing hormone. Estrogen is a fat storing hormone. It's a growth hormone. So when we actually have higher levels, so here's like a little chain reaction that I think happens a lot with people is they have a high insulin for some reason. And by the way, it can be stress. So a lot of people go, well, I'm not eating any sugar, and they check their blood sugar and they've got like a 95. Well, you know, you can spike your blood sugar from just stress and eating nothing. I've actually done it myself and checked my numbers and seen people. If you ever do a CGM, you'll see it. But so for some reason, they're spiking their blood sugar, and then insulin's trying to do its job. So it is released from the pancreas to bring down that glucose. So that's the first stimulus, is whatever has raised the glucose, stress or poor food. And then, you know, or even lack of sleep, which raises cortisol. So that recipe creates elevated insulin. And then as soon as the insulin is high, and it's a matter of, you know, it's normal for the insulin to bump up a little bit, but it should be minimal, and it should come right back down. Right. The problem is that for most people, it's elevated for a long time and multiple times a day, like constantly. You see people walking around drinking those 2 liters of soda, their insulin is like elevated all the time. And so once you start to have that, now you're storing fat and you're making a home for that extra estrogen. And so your body is always going to be making estrogen, right? For you, a lot less than for me, but we're all making it. And now we're getting bombarded from our environment. And so now we've got a place to store it. We got more fat and places to put that estrogen. And on top of that, when your insulin levels get high, your thyroid level can drop. And when your thyroid is impaired, you lose function, or estrogen levels go up. So a lot of times people with low functioning thyroid, even if it's like subclinical, they'll have high cholesterol and estrogen dominance.
Yes.
Super common, because that they're not functioning. So like I said, it's never just one thing. It's always fitting together.
Well, and that's the lesson here that I want people to take away today, which, by the way, fascinating conversation, loving this, is that if one thing is off, it's going to set this chain reaction of things off in the body. And I think if people got their insulin under control, it would help prevent the estrogen dominance from ever becoming a thing, because you're not going to mess with your thyroid issues. You're not going to mess with body fat being stored and thus estrogen being stored in there and having it develop that way. It just does seem to me, kind of looking at it from a system standpoint, what should we focus on? How do you get people to fix this? And it sounds like getting insulin down is a key aspect of it.
Right. And there's a couple ways to do that. And I think the first thing, because it's highly popularized, first thing that people go to is like the keto diet, which can work really well. Doesn't work great for everybody, but I've had people, most people seem to do pretty good with it, at least for a period of time, until they can get those levels down.
Yeah.
So coming in and out of ketosis, I think can be really helpful for people. But I have had people that have worked on keto diets for like years and got nowhere. And when you dig into it a little bit, I believe it's because they have had past traumas
Yes.
or a lot of stress. And I talk about this in my book too, because I had a lot of past traumas. You can talk about any point in your life. Or have you ever heard of the ACEs, the Adverse Childhood Events Study? Okay, so I did a lot of work in that. And people that have had past traumas or have chronic stress, which tell me somebody that doesn't have chronic stress, right? I'd love to hear somebody in the comments tell me that they have a stress-free life, because I've never seen it.
I want to meet them so I could punch them in the face.
Right? Thank you. Yeah, let's beat that person up a little bit. But yeah, so we have all of this constant stressors. And by the way, even if you've had a trauma in your life that is gone, right? It's in the past, it's in the history. If you've not dealt with that or processed that, and it's still living in here, your body never forgets.
Yes.
You have to process that stuff and move it out, because it will constantly cause the stress. And physiologically, that's where that cortisol goes, bing, I'm going up.
And as somebody who did go through pretty bad childhood trauma in my teenage years, I was beaten and berated both mentally and physically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, your body doesn't forget. I still have, and I'll notice them now. That's the cool thing. Once you kind of start doing this work, you start to notice triggers. You start to notice, okay, what happens that then you have this visceral reaction in your body. And then you can work on it. But I don't think you fully ever let it all go. Like,
I don't think so either.
My brain doesn't forget anything.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. And there's actually a really wonderful book for anybody who's experienced trauma, abuse, or anything like that in your childhood. It's called The Body Keeps Score.
Yes.
It's great book. And no, I don't think we can change the past, but I think we can learn to manage our emotions about it. So remember that it's not the stress that makes us sick. It's our response to it and how we perceive it.
Awareness is everything. It's because I've been doing a lot of the mindset stuff and helping people with trauma. I got another whole podcast I do all about mindset and trauma and things like that called One Step Deeper. And it's like, we go there. We dig deep into these kinds of things, because if you're stuck, if you're eating a great diet, if you're doing all these physical things to try to better yourself and things aren't moving, and I don't even mean just weight. Yeah, that's an obvious one, but blood sugar coming down, insulin coming down, getting your estrogen dominance under control. If those things aren't happening with what you're doing, that's dig deeper. You try to say, hey, is it unresolved trauma? Is it something else going on in my life? Is my gut health off? Do I have excessive toxins, maybe heavy metals in the body? There's all kinds of things that can impact this.
Yeah. And you know what's even crazier is I think a lot of people don't realize that stress and trauma, in whatever fashion it shows up, actually has an effect on the way your organs function. And it's through the vagus nerve. So it's not Vegas like the party town. It's VAGUS. You can look it up and read into it for viewers that are new to that. But the vagus nerve is your cranial nerve. It's the 10th cranial nerve, called the wandering nerve. And it actually innervates a lot of our digestive organs, including your pancreas that controls your blood sugar.
Yes.
Including your gut, including like all of your organs that are related to digestive health. This nerve runs through that. And its job is to get a message, tell the organ what to do. Yes. And when that nerve becomes damaged from stress or trauma, so basically it's activated when we're in the rest and digest. Yes. And when we're in the stress response, it's like dormant. And so it's like if you're not flexing that muscle, it loses its muscle tone. And that vagus nerve needs to be activated through those meditations, chanting, like all of the things that stimulate the parasympathetic, right? And we don't do that in our culture.
There are two things I do for my vagus nerve. I actually have this essential oil that's made specifically for the vagus, and you just rub it back there and nice. Get there and kind of do this little massage, and it just and then you get all the aromatherapy. But then the other thing I do is when I do ice baths, getting that below the cold water, because Talk about parasympathetic. When you're ice bath and your vagus nerve is all happy with the cold, that you are so chill, you are so zen.
Yeah.
Do
So
it for
that's,
reason. Just do it for the zen. It's amazing.
you're tough. I just go and jump in the water. That's cold enough for me. I can't deal with the ice yet. I'm just not there.
Oh, I have one of those tanks. There's a company called Morozco Forge. I ordered one. It's going to be here in a couple weeks, where you can set the temperature. And so I'm ready for like 34, 35 degrees, and then getting my head, basically my nose will be above the water and everything else will be below the water.
My gosh. Yeah. Kudos to you. I'll be watching I'll be watching at home with my hot tea and blankets while you're soaking in the ice cubes.
I love cold. I don't do hot very well because I'm already but no, I don't do the cold very well, and so, or don't do the hot very well.
But the ice is awesome. Like, it really does stimulate the nerves. So there's a lot of ways that you can do for people that don't like the ice bath, or there's a lot of ways that you can work on this nerve, which does impact estrogen dominance along with your gut health and everything else. Like we said, it all pieces together. But I did a video maybe a week ago on like breathing exercises, singing, chanting, humming, gargling. Another thing that people don't realize actually affects their physical health is just like being with people. And in the last year, right, all of this fear that people are infected with and trying to isolate and everything has been, I think, very detrimental to people's health.
Girl, I have been to 2 biohacking conferences in like the last month. I have never had so much fun at conferences. And one of the conferences was really lame. The other one was great, but one of them was really lame. But I still had fun because I was around people and I got to hug people and see eyes and laugh. Like,
it's super important. Like, we need to connect with other humans. And it's actually when we, so everyone knows the hormone oxytocin.
Yes.
Oxytocin, it's kind of got its popularized by like breastfeeding women or, when you have intimate connections and things like that. But it's actually produced in your body when you're having like an in-person conversation with someone, you're laughing, you're talking, you're connecting. It's like the connection hormone.
Yes.
And it actually is the antidote to cortisol. It's like tipping the scale. So the more that we have those connections, the less that stress goes down. And I'll tell you that in my professional work, we've had like a 900% increase in calls to crisis suicide hotlines over the last 2 years. And I really believe it's because people are flooded with fear. And then they have no connection. They're wanting to hole up in their homes and do this isolating thing. It's just terrible.
Well, and look what it did to our kids. I think I saw a statistic, 1 in 4 teenagers last year attempted suicide, many of them successful at it. And it's like, yeah,
it's frightening.
Like, the ramifications of decisions, that's a big one. And you never really hear that talked about in the mainstream. All the down regulation of all these decisions to keep us safe have made us less safe in a lot of other ways.
For sure. I think it's, in my opinion, absolute opposite thing. I mean, there's ways to keep, I'm a believer in your health is not, my health isn't depending on your health. My health is depending on my health. And so if I am good here and I'm strong and I'm eating well and I'm dealing with stress and I'm getting sunshine and all that, that's probably the best thing I can do. And anybody outside of that isn't really, you know what I mean? I'm a believer of the terrain theory.
If someone else is at risk, then they need to work on their own terrain.
They need to work on themselves. Yeah. Well, like this whole idea that we're responsible for other people, I mean, it's a nice thought, but it's just not true. I mean, we have to be responsible for our own health. And that means not just relying on your doctor to say, here's a drug to keep you healthy, goodbye. It means taking responsibility for yourself. And you're a great promoter of that. I hear your lives and you talking to people every day and saying, look, get your ass outside, stop sitting around whining about your life and how unhealthy and unfit you are, and go do something about it. And that's really what it boils down to, is I think a lot of people don't do that. They want someone to fix it, and they want someone else to be responsible or give them a pill or whatever.
Well, we've been conditioned in our culture that health comes in a pill, that health comes from a man or a woman in a white coat who tells you this is what you do, rather than you're the boss, you're the author of your own domain, you figure out what to do, learn for yourself, and then go do those things.